Good evening, everyone, and welcome to yet another insightful session on this platform, the Executive Network, um, was which is designed to bring transformation to everyone who is interested in becoming the leader that we were born to be. Um, on this platform, we have a very simple belief: everyone, absolutely everyone, is a leader. Now, we might not be exhibiting the what we know to be the attributes of leaders, but rest assured, we are leaders, but we are on our way to becoming the leader that we are born to be. So if you are joining us for the first time, I want to welcome you. I want to really congratulate you for taking this time to invest in your personal leadership development. This platform is totally non-religious, it's non-political, it's simply a platform where leaders connect to share together, to sharpen our ideas, to help in developing one another so that we can bring the required change into our world. If you observe what I also see, perhaps on the news or on the various media platforms, you see that our world is actually in trouble. We have troubles seeming to spring up everywhere. But it just seems that humanity just can't help itself. We are inventing things and developing technologically and so on and so forth at a much faster rate in history. Yet we are experiencing so much problems of nearly of every kind that you can imagine. And it seems that we just don't know what to do with ourselves, if you may say that. So, and that's why we have this platform, that in a little way at least, we can be part of the solutions rather than being part of the problems. I want to introduce an idea this evening. Obviously, over the last few weeks, we've been looking at kingdom leadership on one hand. We've also looked at personal leadership over time. As a matter of fact, most of this year, our focus is on personal leadership. If you look at leadership, you can look at it in a few dimensions. One, personal leadership, and then corporate leadership, which can then go on to what you can call national leadership or community leadership. So, but at this time, we are focused on personal leadership, which is the development of the individual. Why are we doing that? You can only give what you have. You can only lead people as far as you have gone yourself. So that's why at this time, our focus, our primary objective is the development of each of us as individuals. And I'm very glad that you have chosen to go on this journey with us. So welcome aboard, and let's change together, as I would normally say. Let's transform together. Now, whenever you go into a new country, perhaps you've just changed country, maybe you're on a business trip, or you're in another country to study or to conduct some kind of affairs, or you've just joined an organization, or you've just sort of changed a territory, the first thing you ask yourself is, how are things done around here? You're asking that because you want to make sure that you are not violating rules or laws. You want to know how things are done in a place. In the same way, back in the day, centuries ago, when the Roman government went on their expedition to more or less colonize various territories, they demanded that the colonies do things not in their own way, but in the way of the Romans. So you hear something that says, when you are in Rome, you act like the Romans. Now, being in Rome is not necessarily being in Italy. It's being in every territory that the Roman government ruled over. So when you are in Rome, you act like the Romans. Now, I'm introducing this thought because I'm coming to a point. In the same way, when, as a matter of principle, each time a kingdom goes into another territory, there is one thing that they always demand, whether it was the Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, or the Kingdom of France, or the Kingdom of Portugal, or every other great kingdoms in history, every other great kingdom in history, whenever they go into a territory, there is one thing, absolutely one thing that they require. And that thing is that the colony that has just been taken over, they require that people in that place should change their thinking into the ways of the governing kingdom. The word is a familiar word, which you probably have heard many times, is the word repent. The word repent, as a matter of fact, is a word that is used in a colonization experience, which is to demand that a territory changes its way of thinking into the way that the governing influence that's come over it operates. Now, you will see shortly why I'm talking about this idea. Every kingdom will always demand that you change your idea about everything that you have known. In other words, we really don't care what you know. We're asking you to change everything that you know absolutely into our way. It's our way and no other way. Now, the reason why we say this is you never truly change until your idea about yourself changes. You never truly change until your ideas about yourself changes. Now, no man can actually change any other man, really, in the real sense of it. You change by the discovery of the truth about you. Now, there's something that we should note about truth when I use the word truth, is that truth is not an invented idea. Truth is not anything new. Truth, as a matter of fact, is something that is as old itself. It's something that exists, but just hasn't been discovered. So, truth, therefore, is always found through a process of discovery. Now, I'm saying this because I'm talking about the power of an idea, because an idea has the capacity to change the mind and to change everything that you know. Now, an idea is a thought. And when we talk about a thought is simply a word that is unspoken. Now, the fruit of an idea is action. But action is not in the process of conversion of idea to action. There are a few things that happen in between. First, you must be convinced about your action before you do it. There must be some kind of conviction, whether it's coerced or whether it's inspired or whether it's just natural. Secondly, before you have conviction, there must have been a dominant ideology in the mind, or a particular philosophy, a way of thinking. Now, that way of thinking is generated by thoughts or by words. That's why, for people who are familiar with scriptures, as I would normally do, when God was going to create the earth, the first thing he had was what you call word. Now, that word simply means logos, and in the Greek translation of the word logos means an expressed thought or an expressed idea. Okay, so now if the idea or the thought is wrong, then naturally the fruit of the idea will be wrong. And I did say just a moment ago that the fruit of the idea is actually action. So if the idea is wrong, um, action will be wrong as well. So in other words, when you meet a man who perhaps is doing something that you think is not quite appropriate, you don't need to fight the action of the man. That is more or less going after symptoms. I would say you go after the idea, the dominant idea in the mind of the man. So in other words, for you to change your action, you must have, first and foremost, mind conversion. You must have something that is called repentance, which means you change your idea about what you're doing. Change your idea about yourself, change your idea about what you know, and then, and only then, you stand a chance of changing your action. For anyone who is on this broadcast and you're sort of having difficulties to log on, I would suggest that as you come in, you select the today's date in the options. So on the right hand side of the screen, you see a place where you can select the date that you want to actually connect to. So I would suggest that you select today's date and everything should be fine. Okay, continue. Now, when we're talking about idea and action and all of that, I want us to become conversant of what I call the big picture. Now, imagine that you're solving a puzzle. Now, the puzzle, it could be as much, I've seen a puzzle that's about 1,000 pieces. Naturally, you stand very little chance of getting it right if someone else hasn't given you the picture that you are resolving. Everyone who creates a puzzle gives you what the final output should look like before you even begin to do anything at all. So when you are taking each tiny piece of that puzzle, you're trying to work towards not something new, but something that's old. And you get this in the concept of when I was talking about idea the other time, that about truth, that truth is actually nothing new. Truth is something that is old, that pre-exists an action. Truth is something that has always been there, but you might just be lately finding it out. So now, when we're talking about the big picture, the big picture is the summarization of an event or a thing. So the big picture, therefore, provides meaning and context to actions. If you take an action in isolation, there's every possibility that you may have misunderstanding, because that action itself is only a part of something that is whole. All right. The big picture provides a sense of perspective. Now, let's say someone maybe at the moment is broke, has very little money in the account. Well, that is the status at the moment. But if all that the person can think about is the state of being broke, then the person can go into depression because that's all it sees. But if you see that, look, I have the capacity to generate money, I can actually reinvent myself, learn some skills, and actually go out there and become productive, then suddenly you can put the current status into perspective and think, no, this is only temporary. So that's why I say the big picture provides a sense of perspective. The big picture as well is the yardstick for measuring the present. You can put the present into context by saying, right, this doesn't look like what I want to do, but I know what to do with it. I can measure it. I can manage it. When you understand the big picture, the little pieces have more meaning. You can begin to say, okay, now I know what you stand for. Think about the puzzle again. Once you understand the big picture, then regardless of the shape of any of the pieces, you can say, right, you may look shapeless, you look undefined, you look useless, but I think I can find a good use for you. I know where you belong. When you lose sight of the big picture, therefore, activity becomes meaningless and the present seems like finality. Naturally, now you don't know the meaning of the present. I suppose, I mean, with no disrespect, when I hear that someone maybe hurts himself or commits suicide and all of that, somehow they can't see beyond where they are anymore. Somehow they think this is final. Some people suffer maybe broken relationships, and because of how much they've invested into that, they just sort of lose sight of the sight of the future. They lose a sense of perspective, and they do something that sort of hurts them in the present. So when you lose sight of the big picture, activity becomes meaningless, and the present seems like, well, the final state. The big picture is actually the superintended purpose for action. In other words, every action is measured in the context of the big picture of the purpose for which that action is being construed. I always say to people around me that I'm not really interested in what you do. I'm interested in why you're doing what you're doing. I'm interested in the context. What is the outcome? Why are you doing the action? Because action itself may be meaningless. As a matter of fact, action may be deceitful. I can pretend to like someone, but I may be utterly deceiving the individual because my action, if you can't tell the intent of the action, you may utterly misinterpret or misunderstand my motive. Okay, now still on big picture. I said the big picture is the standard, the pattern, and the source of alignment in case of deviation or error. So in other words, if you've gone into error, if you've made a mistake, you have to look at, right, where has this gone away from the big picture? Take this for an example. If someone is building a house, I like to use the example a lot. The architect's plan of a house. That plan is the big picture. That's exactly what we are building. Now, you may not have seen the house, but the plan is a finished product. That's why I was saying the other time that truth, or call it the big picture, is not something that is new. It's in the mind of the architect. The building is an old building because he already finished it in his mind. It's not anything new anymore. So now when the builders make a mistake in the course of constructing the building, you can always say, right, does this align to what the building should look like? And if it does not, you can correct the deviation not by looking at something else, but by looking at the big picture that we're trying to build, at the truth. So truth, or call it the big picture, is the foundation for correction of error. The big picture, I would say, is always at the beginning. Always at the beginning. Just like before I hand over to you a pack of puzzle, I will always give to you what the end should be. So as far as we're concerned, the big picture is the end that we present at the beginning. And I'm talking about this because all of these are fundamental ideas, truths about leadership. Actually, if you observe what I've been doing over the course of these weeks, is I'm working on precepts, simple ideas that actually make sense by the time you put them together. They're ideas about really changing our minds about the way we view a number of things. The big picture is always at the beginning. Now, the beginning is simply an intangible end. It's an end that you have not really experienced, although it exists, but it's yet to be at the same time. Think about the architect's plan again. Now, you see the whole plan on paper. In fact, the architect puts that on a computer system and sort of models the whole thing, measures the weight before any building material is used to touch the ground. Everything is put on plan on the paper. It's put on the system to see how the building will fare against the elements. Now, in all of that process, we have not yet seen any break on the ground. So, but we've already seen the end right from the beginning. Now you can understand this now for people who love to talk about God. God will say, who is a God like me who knows the end from the beginning? That's why I said that every one human being on earth is created after the image of God. And the likeness means that every human being is designed just with the character of God and has the capacity to function like God. If this were not so, then explain to me why the architect functions the way he does, why the builder of automobiles, computers function the way they do. They actually go to the end of the product before they make any one thing. For people who are conversant with, say, software design, the first thing you do is to actually do design first. If you're into building, say, computer applications, the first thing you do is you do a design first, ever before you go into the process of build. So build and design are separate activities. So that's why I say the beginning is the intangible end. The beginning is an end that is yet to become. So let me use this word guardedly. The beginning is an end that is already be, but it has not come. So when you're talking about the beginning, you are saying, you break the word become into two. You have the B part, BE part, but the COME part has not yet arrived. It's still coming. So becoming in itself is the journey to the end that can be. What the architect has on plan, on paper, is called potential. It's the capacity to become a building. Now, the big picture requires right action and unflinching commitment to come to be. Now, let me put this in perspective when we're talking about leadership. Now, as you are at this moment, you may, in your own mind, not look anything like a leader. You may be thinking, I'm still not really sure about myself. I still have not the kind of self-concept that I should have. I'm still even studying. I still don't even know what the future has in stock for me. I don't even know what my purpose is. Okay? Put all that aside. Or let me say it this way. Put all of that into perspective, into the big picture, and say, okay, I am this way right now, but I am coming to be the leader I was born to be. Why is this obsession about leadership? Well, this obsession about leadership is born out of this simple fact. If I met you on the road and I just say, and I give you a slap, or I say, I insult you, I say, you idiot. If you take that lying low, then I'll probably assume that the whole thing about leadership is just a farce. We should just stop talking about it. But if something does rise up inside of you and say, no, what do you mean? Are you talking to me? Then that thing that rises up inside of you is one of the pointers to the fact that there is something in every human that says, I belong somewhere. I deserve a particular kind of treatment, regardless of what I look like at the moment. So my suggestion is this. All of this is going to the fundamental building blocks about the construction of our leadership self. Now, the big picture never requires or never required an invention. It requires imitation and organization. I'll tell you why I say that. There's a particular verse of scripture I read. It says, "Be ye imitators of me as their children." Which means, in God's mind, He's not really interested in you inventing anything. He just wants you to look at what exists and be like it. Let me use another example. If you look at the architect's plan, once you give that to a builder, you are not asking for any other invention from the builder. You are simply asking him to build what has been finished on paper. So the architect is not expecting an invention on the building. Is expecting just a copy. Just imitate the building diagram and organize all of the blocks, all of the wood to fit into shape. When I give you a piece of puzzle, I'm not asking about your idea about the puzzle. I'm just telling you, imitate the picture that you see and organize every piece of the puzzle until it looks like the big picture. Now, let's now talk about God's big picture, because you cannot talk about true leadership without God. Let's underline that and settle it once and for all. Now, I said true leadership. I'm qualifying that leadership by that, call it, is it adverb now, or that, or maybe call it, I'll check my English. I'm qualifying leadership because there are different kinds of leadership in the world. Okay, when you think about the likes of Napoleon, what do you think about? He's a leader, or he was a leader, but his own idea about leadership was entirely different. If you look at the leaders in history, say Caesar Augustus, his own idea about leadership at the time was utterly different. The idea was, well, if you're not a Roman, you are an inferior citizen of the world, and you must be put through a process of subjugation. Okay, it was still a leader, but he had different ideas about leadership. So that's why I'm saying true leadership from God's perspective. So that's why I'm talking about this subject now. God's big picture. The administration of heaven and earth through one government is actually God's big picture. God wanted heaven and earth to be ruled by just one government, his own government. It's just the same way. If Britain, at the time when Britain was one of the biggest empires in the world, when Britain went to, say, Ghana, Britain was not looking for Ghana to invent another form of government in that local territory. Britain wanted Ghana to be ruled by the laws, by the government of Britain. As a matter of fact, Ghana automatically has an head of state, which is not found in their country. The head of state is found back in England. The same way for every other territory. When France went into Ivory Coast, automatically the king of France became the ruler, not just over France, but over Ivory Coast. So in the same way, you have to think of God in the sense of the colonial experience. But the only thing is this, is a benevolent king who has the best interest of his colonial heart. And you see why I say this. He holds and retains absolute rule over heaven and other territories, including earth. Just the same way that when a king takes over a territory, he is still the dominant force, the dominant authority, the dominant power over that territory. But look at this. In the other kingdoms, you have kings and subjects, but not so in God's perspective. God, right, I'm not going to do this all by myself. I need people who are just like me, who are going to rule earth for me. So his love nature birthed his offspring, man. who is just like himself. The same nature, well, call it image, the same characteristic, the same nature, and the same way of functioning. You call it likeness. Let me amuse you, and you can check this if you will. Every law on earth, every law, including this country, the country that you are in, was built out of the book called the Bible. Now, a lot of inventions have been done over time, either moved away from it or something, but the fundamental law that ruled most of the nations on the earth came from the Bible, pure and simple. So we cannot get away from that, because that is, as I did say at some time ago, that if you want to find the truth, you don't need to go forward, you need to go backwards. Going forward is an attempt to invent. Going backwards is an attempt to discover something that already exists. Okay. Now, God intended that man rules the territory of earth as the sole delegated authority. It's the same way that you post an ambassador into a different region to govern that area, or to represent the king or the government in that other territory. And only the ambassador reserves the right, the authority to represent the government that sends him there. Now, I'm saying this because I want us to get this perspective. I'm trying to summarize the Bible in just one slide. And if you can put this in perspective, then you would get the big picture. And then filling in the pieces in between will be easier. You can put it into context. Now, the disruption of God's plan through humans' misbehavior still did not cancel his original intent. God's intent are unchanging, they are fixed, they last for all times. So, even though his man misbehaved, the plan still remains unchanged. And well, like any investor, your mind is to get your plan back on track. For people who do project management, once you're sort of you have a slack, or you're falling behind in your program, what you want to do is to get back on track. So the restoration program that God himself established was to bring his counsel, its original counsel, back on track. So the restoration program reestablished the priority and the immutability of his original concept, counsel, and intent. Restoration, as a matter of fact, is the repositioning into the pre-established plan. Why? So that man can continue the pre-established course of action. Well, and what is that? Simply put, administration of Earth territory and the world upon it. Pure and simple. So that big picture we need to keep in mind. In other words, regardless of how we see the earth and the state of the earth, don't forget, you are responsible for it. You have a responsibility to make sure that the earth remains as it was intended to be. Now, you may be thinking, I'm just one out of 7.2 billion people in the world. Well, and I'll show you why that isn't necessarily a problem. But before I talk about that, let's look at something that sort of baseline the idea that we saw in the previous slide. And this is it. If you can read it with me. It says, behold the heavens, and the heaven of heavens is the Lord's, thy God. The earth also, with all that is therein. Okay? That probably tells you, okay, it's all of God's, let's not worry about it. But read the second one. Second one says, the heaven and the heavens are the Lord's, but the earth he has given to the children of men. Which means, okay, God has said, right, heaven is mine, but earth is yours. He has given connotes that he has, I own it, and so I have the capacity to give it. It's mine because you can't give what is not yours. It's mine by right of creation and ownership, but I choose to delegate it to you. And we need to keep this very much in mind. It's saying the earth he has given to the sons of men, to the children of men. Why is that important? Every action of God stipulates man's strategy. That's why I mentioned earlier on that God's demand is just one thing: just imitate me. God is not looking for an invention, as it were. Is looking for an imitation. It requires man to simply imitate him. Okay. Now, everything that Jesus himself did re-established and reveals man's strategy, what man's strategy ought to be. So when you look at Jesus, you should be looking at what you ought to be and what you ought to do. Now, Jesus was not the first person to show this. The man Adam was the first person to show exactly what God's strategy about everything is. And when he sort of fumbled, well, God waited for a while, but in sending Jesus, it was simply reiterating that my strategy has not changed. I still have in mind exactly what I had in mind at the beginning. Look, we are talking about someone who's entirely outside of time. So all that has happened in time makes very little difference to him. His mind has still not changed about his idea. So God's priority for man is imitation, not invention. Imitation of a strategy. Jesus was God's idea about mankind. So anything that we see about Jesus is exactly what God has in mind about mankind. Jesus was a demonstration of what man was meant to be. His birth condition cancels all of man's excuses about privileges. In other words, if you say, I was not born in a rich house, or the circumstances around me are so unfavorable, well, that still isn't an excuse as far as God is concerned. Why? He made sure that the man who will become the King of Kings was born in the lowest possible circumstance. I mean, lowest. None of us here, I'm sure, was born in a place where the first persons that greet you, the first midwife that greeted you was Mr. Goat or Mr. Donkey. No? Or Miss Hen. Well, the man who was to become King of Kings was born in a manger. So it means it's nursing aids, but not even humans. Okay. So that cancels every of our excuses about privileges. It means you can't talk about money, you can't talk about status, you can't talk about connections, you can't talk about your network. No. It says all of that is cancelled. Let me show you that I can begin as low as possible and still rise up to be the King of Kings. Now, Jesus' childhood cancels the pride of man. What do I mean by that? He was the King of Kings, yet he took orders. Son, please, can you go across the road and get me some salt? Okay, yes, ma'am. Son, can you please go to the well and get me some water? Well, this is the King of Kings, but yet he still experienced normal childhood. It does mean that it does not matter what state you are at the moment. It doesn't matter how many people have rule over you or controlling you or seem to be your bosses. Well, that still does not cancel your leadership. Jesus' death addresses man's desperation and fear of finality. And this is very vital, which means no event whatsoever should be seen as being absolutely final in our quest for becoming leadership. No setback should hold anyone back, because there's always a day after tomorrow. There's always sunshine after rain. There's always life after death. In fact, Jesus put it this way: except the corn of wheat falls to the ground and die, it abides alone. But when it does die, then it comes up again, it gains life again, and then it brings more seeds, more wheat, more crop to the earth. Now, his resurrection proved the real intent of God, which is to lead in life on earth. Imagine that after Jesus raised from the dead, he came back to one thing. The Bible says that he began to teach men about the kingdom of God. So which means death couldn't even change his mind about leadership. It means he did not forget the experience of death, did not make him forget what his real message was. We'll come back to that at some point. It says, if the life lessons of Jesus are misunderstood, then God's real intent will be missed. Which is why I say we must look at Jesus and understand God's strategy. So which means to understand God's strategy, all you have to do really is to study the man Jesus. It was God's perfect idea about mankind. So if we miss the lessons of his life, if we see him as some religious individual, as the founder of Christianity, which is absolutely not true, then we would have missed God's intent about mankind. If we fail to see that Jesus came around to address the fall of Adam, to address that problem, and look, let's talk about it. If someone stumbles, you're going for an interview, and somehow there's a stain on the shirt, and you have to drive back home to change your shirt. After changing your shirt, do you then sit them at home and then put on the TV and then watch whatever news, CNN? No, you change your shirt and you dash back to the car and drive to the interview, because the agenda has still not changed. You are on a mission to get something. There was a disruption, but you correct it and you get back on track. Somebody's building a house, and somehow maybe there was limited funds. Well, and you go around to the bank or wherever to say, okay, can I take some loan? After you get the loan, what you don't then say, let me go and find the best car around to drive. No, you don't forget that you are building a house. You come back to the action and get on with it. So which is why I'm saying the resurrection of Jesus is just proof that God is still interested in his original plan, and it says, get back to track and continue the work. Now let's talk about a leader's value system from the perspective of Jesus. Jesus understood that for you to be where you will be, you must be where you are. Okay, this man was to be the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings, yet it was in a capital shop. Yes, it was still asked to fetch water. Yes, it was still being asked to buy salt. And that talks to us, really, that when we begin to see our future, when we begin to see our purpose, let's not forget that we must be where we are on the way to being where we will be. In other words, the present is what qualifies us for the future. So our capacity to treat the present well is our pre-qualification for the future that we see. Now, there's a temptation. We may think, wow, now that I'm seeing what I'm saying, if any attempt to not do this is distracting me from my purpose, well, please learn. What you see is permanent. The plan may change, but purpose is permanent. On the course to becoming where you are, life does happen. You may have a detour, but the destination is permanent. You will still get to where you will be, but be where you are at the moment. Jesus did prove that it's important to begin small. And how did he do that? Look, I've come to change the whole world, but I found one team member at a time. As a matter of fact, Jesus never traveled outside of Israel. And yet, I've come to change the whole world. So he began small. Jesus believed in work. And as a matter of fact, he chose workers to join in his leadership work. He believed in professionals and business people. The business of the day in northern Galilee at the time was fishing and farming. And of course, there are other occupations, but the dominant practice there was simply fishing and farming. Or you might be a government worker or somebody who sort of, there's always the banking system. So there are people who are accountants and so on and so forth. So, but Jesus went specifically to people who are busy, people who are doing some work or the other. Peter, James, John, or Matthew, the accountant. And I think even Judas must have had some kind of experience in treasury, which is why he chose him and he handed treasury to him. So he chose workers, and he believed in professionals and business. And really, this is really why we have the executive network. The executive network is not for religion. It's about the marketplace. It's about professionals who are actively engaged in the marketplace. It's for business people who are actively engaged in the marketplace. Our mission, our mandate is very clear. It's very simple. For people who are actively engaged in the marketplace or are looking to engage in the marketplace actively. Jesus refused to associate with the established religious order because he did not bring a religion. He did not want a religion. He wanted to restore man back to the government of earth. And religion is not how you govern the earth. Pure and simple. Jesus believed in the true value of man. You see, there is this thing about movement for equality. Personally, I think both the one who thinks that is superior to other people and the person who feels inferior are both wrong. Because every human was created equal from the beginning. So the leader himself, the master leader himself, understood that, and he reinforced the true value of every humankind that he met. In fact, when he saw people who are acting below their privileges and their rights, he would lift them up. He would say things like this: go and don't make that mistake again. In other words, he saw that the man is beyond his mistakes. You are beyond the mistakes that you are making right now. You are beyond your feeling of inferiority, your poor self-concept, your devaluation of self. You are beyond that. The master himself sees that. God himself sees that, and he constantly speaks to you. He says, if you have gone in the mud, I will wash you clean. I will bring you out again. I'm not interested in the mud. I'm interested in you. The mud is an event. You are a permanent idea in the minds of God. Okay? He lifted them up. And there was something he constantly did not want to see. He disapproved of those who devalue men by arrogating their rights and privileges above those of others. In other words, he did not want to see any man subjecting another human. And he said it this way: the kings of the earth lord it over you, and they make themselves benefactors of you. They benefit from you. But it shall not be so among you. Let him that will become the leader be as the one who serves. In other words, value each person enough to serve them. How do you serve them? There is a gift inside of you that you present to them. But before you present to them, make sure that the gift is presented in the best way possible. It's called refinement. Refine your gift. Think about them as people who are worthy of the best value that can come out of you, and present it to them in that light. I mentioned something about submission the other time, and I want to talk briefly on this. The leadership act of submission. To Jesus, nothing was impossible. He never did negotiate his leadership. He was always in charge. He did prioritize work above pleasure, but he did something. He was always submissive to authority. First, with his parents, to his father. He would say something like this: I never do anything of my own accord. I'm not here to do an invention. I just imitate my father. What I see my father do, I do. What I hear him say, I say. Is submitted to authority. Of course, in submitting to authority, you must find the right authority to submit to. Because some other guys did ask him, he said, tell us, by what authority do you do what you do? He said, well, I'm not going to answer the question. You tell me, this other individual, by what authority did he do what he did? So, in other words, he did not at any point in time submit himself to the authority of call them the Pharisees, if you like. You can use other words for it. Now, the one thing to note about submission is this: submission does not cancel your authority. Every one individual has the authority to execute his gift. But submitting yourself under a leadership authority does not diminish and does not cancel your authority. What it actually does, in fact, is that submission legitimizes your authority. Submission gives you a platform to serve your authorized gift. When I'm talking about authority, I will do a session on this, hopefully, as we go along. Authority is different from power. Authority is the endowment to deliver what you are capable of. Let me give an example. Think about a bird. A bird flies because it has wings. The bird has the authority to fly. And it has authority to land just about anywhere. And so when you see the bird, it flies without asking for permission. Okay, let me give you another example. The apple tree has the authority to bring forth apple. Pure and simple. The fish has the authority to swim. But let's put it this way. The fish must submit to water so that it can exercise its authority to swim. The bird must submit itself to the authority of the air so it can fly. The apple tree must submit itself to the authority of the soil. See, when you put the apple seed in the soil, the soil takes over. The soil first kills the apple seed, almost. Then it brings it out and then supplies its nutrients so that the apple seed can go through being a shrub to some kind of short tree and then to the full-blown tree. In fact, not just that, the apple tree must also submit itself to the authority of the sun, sunlight, and other elements. So authority legitimizes and helps, submission rather, helps you to actually function in your authority. Now, Jesus received authority from his Father. But not just that, he also gave authority to people to perform what they are capable of. Now, I said authority is different from power because you actually have power. Everybody has power, whether by potential, just like the battery has power inside of it to power a car. So there's power resident inside of it. But the battery needs authority, submission into a car to supply its power. So that's why I did say that power becomes illegal without authority. If you function without authority, you become illegal. And I think that's one of the things that's happening in our world, where most people are acting outside of their authority to act. Having power is not the problem, but it is acting without authority. And so it becomes illegal. Now let's look at another thing that the master did do. Now I did say that he gave authority. In Jesus' mind, he knew that even though his assignment was very big, but he could never do it alone. I mean, think about it. We are talking about the man you call King of Kings and Lord of Lords. It was, and I use the word man because it did say, I'm the Son of Man. Son means representative. So I'm the representative of all mankind. That's why I called himself that name. Okay. So it says, look, Jesus knew that you can never change the world with a large group of people who want sustenance. In other words, if you are only interested in feeding, you cannot change the world. Sustenance is about what I'm going to eat, what I'm going to drink, what I'm going to wear, how I'm going to preserve myself. If that is your preoccupation, then you cannot yet achieve the leadership capacity that is inside of you. Jesus knew the real interest of crowds. So when crowds do come around him, Jesus knew that 95% of them, maybe even 99% of them, are just after two things or more: preservation, self-preservation, and self-gratification. They are looking for welfare. What is in it for me? What can I get from this? So the crowd are only after what they can get, really. But leaders are after what they can give. So Jesus knew the real interest of crowds. So that's why he never did commit himself to them. As a matter of fact, he knew what to do with crowds. He knew that you can never trust the crowd. Jesus knew that you can only know a hungry man's heart content when he's filled. You can't truly know someone. You see, if someone comes to you and looks humble and all that, whilst he's hungry, well, I can suggest to you that you have not really found a real man. Give the man food, let him be satisfied, then you begin to see the real person. That's why I say that, there's this verse in Proverbs, the King Solomon did say, he said, a full soul loathes and honeycomb. In other words, somebody who's filled even doesn't want honey. So, but in the mouths of the hungry, every bitter thing is sweet. So the hungry submits himself to virtually, can put himself through anything to get what he wants. But once he's filled, then he even loathes an honeycomb. Jesus knew that real change happens with a small group of people committed to intensive transformation. That's why in our world, look at it, in every government cabinet, only very few people are there. In fact, in our electoral process, you see that we only have a few representatives of the entire populace. And these are the people who debate laws, who work on policies on behalf of the rest of the people. So real change actually happens with a small group of people who are committed to intensive transformation. As a matter of fact, in most places, maybe a maximum of 5% of the population actually makes things happen. And that's proven. Jesus also chose business people and professionals because there's a reason for it. Because these guys are involved in the world. I use the word world because the world are environments, are systems of government, are systems of affairs on the earth. So he went into the fishing industry and he got a few people because he wanted to use something that is beyond just fishing fish. He went to the accountant, that's to the in the finance world, and brought out people, both the greedy one and the one that is not quite greedy, the one that has the ability to be more prudent about resources. He went around. He went to market women. He carefully selected his team because you cannot change people who are not, you cannot change the world unless you have people who are strategically placed in the world. That's why when you probably wonder why he said it. He said, he was praying a prayer for himself. He said, Father, I do not ask that you remove them from the world, but no, just keep them in there, or keep them safe in there. In other words, you can influence without being tarnished. You can impact without being influenced. You can influence without being influenced, if I can put it that way. So you can be in the world, in that system, as an agent of change without being changed yourself. I guess that's the principle of the yeast. The yeast knows that once it is put inside dough, it is the power, it is the transformer. The yeast knows that it's never going to become the yeast. The yeast knows that it's never going to become the dough. It knows that it is the transformer of the dough. Salt knows that it's never going to become the soup, the pot of soup. Salt understands that he is the determinant of the order, the influence inside the bowl of soup. I can make this tasty, or I can make it unbearable to taste. So that's why Jesus chose that. And as a matter of fact, that's what this platform is about. It's about raising people with a totally different mindset who know what to do in various environments, who understand their influence. And you can see the dough, when the yeast is in the dough, the yeast does not need to shout. Because real power does not need to shout, really. It just needs to be in the dough. Salt does not need to shout inside the soup. It only needs to be in the soup. Dye that we use to color our clothes does not need to shout. It only needs to come into contact with the piece of material. Jesus knew how to prune the crowd to retain true disciples. In other words, not everyone who comes around you is for you. And we must always understand that. So that's why it was never really swayed by the comments of the crowd. I'm learning to do that myself. It was never swayed by the adulation, by the acknowledgement of the crowd. Because people can be with you, but they may not be for you. And Jesus knew that miracles, let me use that word, miracles never change people's mind. Let me talk a bit about this. If miracles do change minds, then I suppose for people who read scriptures, the people who experience the most recorded miracles should be the most changed people in the world. As a matter of fact, a time did come when God said to Moses, said, I am tired. You're talking about God himself saying, I am tired, Moses. Let me get rid of these people and start afresh with you. I don't want to have anything to do with them anymore. I am tired. In fact, it was the first one that said, for these are stiff-necked people, meaning they just wouldn't change. They've seen, in fact, in the Psalm 95, it said that for 40 years, they tempted the Lord, even though they saw his works. He said, that's why I've said to them, in my wrath, in my anger, that they will never enter into my rest. Which means all that they saw about God's work was not enough to change their mind. And that's why it's good to have miracles, but I'm never really swayed by it, because miracles don't change minds. The mind is only changed by the revelation of truth, by discovery. When I say revelation here now, I'm not talking about a religious word at all. Revelation means making visible what was always there, but you have just seen it. change actually happens. The mind changes, which this leads me back to the beginning, that the mind only changes when you discover truth. That's a fundamental principle. But your mind does change about you when you discover the truth about you. So you can apply that principle into everything. If you know the reason for mango tree, then as a pharmacist, you can bring out some medicines that people have not yet seen. There are active ingredients in plants around the world that have not yet been discovered. Now, the fact that you have not discovered does not mean that it's not present there. It's always there, just awaiting the time that you will see it. So when we say discovery, it's not an invention. It's only a coming to terms with what has always been there, but you just haven't seen it. I want to talk about it. I'm talking about it in these terms because change is not born out of shouting, out of storms and thunders and fire and lightning. No. As a matter of fact, God did not say that a man will change you. No. It did not even say that he will change you. No. But if he could, he would have changed the whole nation of Israel. What he said is this: you will know the truth, and once you know the truth, you will be changed. You will be free from your current state of affairs. You'll be free from errors. And that's only when and all of that process happens in the mind. You know, I'm not a religious person. So most of the time when you talk about religious words, I sort of just look at it and I just, okay, that's fine. I'm not a religious person because religion was never God's intention, was never God's idea by anything. It did not want it. It did not associate with it. It brought back to man, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. It was bearing it to deliver it back to them. So everything that Jesus did, therefore, that's why I refuse to separate every of Jesus' action or God from leadership, because there is no bigger lie than to associate God with religion. It is the biggest lie that is sold to humans. Everything about God is everything about man, is everything about what man ought to be and should be. So when we're talking about, that's why you should freely talk about God anywhere, because we are talking about what every man aspires to. It's like you're looking for something, but you don't know how to find it. And someone is talking about it, but what the person is talking about has already been bastardized to you. So you think, no, I don't want it. Whereas it's exactly what you wanted. So which means we must find ways of presenting it to make sure that people understand it. So which means take the religion out of it, present the truth as it is. Because no man argues against a medicine that heals the body. If I bring a drug that heals headache, no one argues about it. All the man who has headache wants is the medicine to cure it, or whatever it is that cures it. So that's why we're doing what you're doing. And I'm looking forward to us really transforming ourselves. That transformation is going to come, like I said, through the discovery of truth about ourselves. I said it before, that the reason why we know God is so that we can know what we ought to look like, because we are asked to do one thing: imitate God. Ephesians 5:1. Be ye therefore imitators of me as their children. So God did not say invent me. As a matter of fact, the Bible did say that God punished Moses and Aaron because of their invention. When God asks you to do one thing, it does not ask you to do two. So, do this thing, just copy me. Let's go away with this word. Copy. Imitation. God's copy. God's imitation. That's what we are. And that is really the foundation of our leadership. If we get this right, ladies and gentlemen, we will have begun a process of change that will utterly transform our society. It may just be you alone, but I can tell you this: what you are, you make happen around you. So you have to be, and then you can transform. Salt is not the quantity of salt that allows you to make a difference. It's the fact that it is salt. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being on this broadcast once more. And I look forward to um, continuing this next week. If you have any particular, say, topic that you want us to talk about, why don't you use the chat facility? Just put it there. If you are thinking, I have something to talk about, because leaders do talk, and I'm looking forward to a point where a lot of us really have the chance to express our opinions, our ideas. As a matter of fact, if you want to sort of express your idea, your thought, your comment on this platform, I welcome you to do so, because we are in a process of change. Change happens, don't forget, by small group of committed people who are intent on transformation. So you are a change agent. Think about the industry that you are in. Is it healthcare? Is it IT? Is it finance? Are you in governance? It doesn't matter. Are you even in a religious organization? You are a change agent in that environment. The word world that I did mention the other time means systems of government. So the world is not the same thing as the earth. The world is the governing system over the earth. So think about it. The sport industry is a world. And there's a lot. I'm going to talk about that hopefully in one of this series. Just talk about what the world actually means and give you the characteristics of the worlds. But suffice us to just mention it now, because if we don't know this, see, we are not on this platform to keep us knowing what we always knew. We are on this platform to actually do what I said in the beginning, repenting, to change our mind about how we say things, how we do things, how we see the world, how we see the concept of leadership. Because if all that we know now is what we keep knowing, we cannot become agents of change. And the mandate, the task, the assignment is to become agents of change. So we have to get this right. We have to become the answer to our prayers. Let me put it that way. You must become the change that you seek. As a matter of fact, you are the answer to your questions. You are the answer to the change that you seek. You are, that is the B part, BE part. But you must become the change. So everyone is a leader, but everyone must become the leader. There are two things. One talks about potential, that you have all that it takes. You have the nature of God already. You have the capacity to function like God already, but you must actually now become the nature and actually function like it. See, every pen can write, but it must actually write indeed. Every bird can fly, but when you give birth to an eagle, have you ever watched a documentary on eagles? You see the eaglet in the nest, and these are powerful birds, but they look so helpless in the nest. They're just waiting for the mother to bring some meat to their mouth, and the mother tears the meat and puts it there. They look utterly helpless. But give it 3 years, you see a mighty bird of prey that is capable of lifting an animal that is twice its size. Now, it was always an eagle, but it needed to become an adult eagle. It's the process of growth that we're talking about. It's a process of growth. We are leaders. Yes, we are. Regardless of the state, The state of being does not change the truth of being. The state of being does not change the truth of being. As a matter of fact, the word being is the same word that is for becoming, because you are you be, but you are continuing to be what you're meant to be. And our destination actually is being restored fully into the image that is Christ. Jesus, like I said the other time, is the perfect example that every man aspires to. Everything that he did is man's strategy, and we must become it. We must. If we don't, well, the world continues to be in a state of disrepair, because man is the principal agent of change on the earth. And every one human is an equal collaborator in that exercise. Is it when we say that every man is a leader, the question that people ask is, if every man is a leader, then who is the follower? Well, that question is proof that we've been educated wrongly, because the question indicates that leadership is about dragging other people along, it's about leading people. But no, leadership is not about people. A strange idea, you may call it, but that's the truth. Leadership is leading yourself in the area of your gift. So, and if a man is doing that, then automatically it is possible for every man to submit to the gift of another one. The gift of it's you becoming all that you can be to serve your gift, and the other party 7.23. So which means the earth should never be out of resources. The earth should never be in want, because if every joint does supply all that the body needs, then the body should function perfectly in vitality. Now, if the head rejects the functioning of the leg, well, the body will be sort of tipping along on one leg. It means the body will never, which become all that is meant to be. So, which means you can tell already that if somebody is, that's why I say that both the one who subjugates other people and the subjugated are all victims. Because if I think I'm superior to you and I prevent you from being an equal partaker in the affairs of the earth, automatically I am cutting off a limb. I can never walk on two legs anymore. So this is an idea that must be reinforced. So if somebody comes along and talks about racism and says, hey, you monkey, the person is utterly ignorant and he needs help. He is sick in his mind. He needs to understand that every one human was created equal. And that if you tie one hand to the back, well, there's only so much you can do with one other hand. So your own leadership does not cancel the leadership of other people. If we believe this and we begin to act it, you can literally change your system, the environment where you are. You can literally, because it's what you believe that you teach others, that you reinforce to others. And men are looking for examples that can help them to believe what is right. So if you become what is right by example, you can easily influence at least one person to do the same. That's why I say it's not really about crowd. It's not. As a matter of fact, the master teacher did prove it, that true change happens with small group committed to intensive transformation. I'm hoping you are one of them, and I would really like you to be, because I am one. I've signed up to this. It is an obligation. It's not a choice. It's an obligation. It's not optional. It's obligatory. Thank you very much once again, and let's let's remain committed to intensive transformation, because you don't know your power yet. You are powerful. You have the capacity to bring change in your environment. And you can, because God believes it. It's just that you need to believe it as well. Because sometimes the mother eagle believes that the eaglet can fly, but the eaglet sometimes lacks self-belief because it thinks, no, mom, you are being wicked by throwing me off in the wind. Well, the mother is doing that because the mother believes that the eaglet can fly. Because in the mother knows that the what you call eaglet is in our mind eagle. The mother does not see eagle as eaglet. It sees it as eagle. And it knows when time is right for it to begin to fly. You can fly. Ladies and gentlemen, let's transform, let's change together. Thank you very much for this, for joining us again, and we'll see you next time. God bless you.